Bangladesh still reeling after the assassination of a student leader. Further rallies and attacks on the media have left Bangladeshis on edge and an upcoming election in question. Can the interim government ensure enough security for a selected government to take the reins? And if not, can the country remain stable? I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is Bangladesh. Bangladesh today stands on a precipice. With much anticipated elections less than 2 months away, those who supported the overthrow of Sheikh Hasina and her Awami League are hoping to launch a new era for their country. But for those who supported Sheikh Hasina, it's a very different story. A ban on their party has left many fearing their reaction and its potential to destabilize the country. Last week's assassination of student leader Sharif Osman Hadi revealed the worst of those fears. And ensuing attacks on media offices further illustrated how dangerous things could get. Here's a look.
The killing of a Bangladeshi student leader has sparked fury at home and heightened tensions with India. 32-year-old Sharif Osman Hadi was a key figure in last year's uprising that toppled Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Hadi, a vocal critic of India where Hasina is taking refuge, had been planning to contest parliamentary elections in February. But on December the 12th, 2 masked gunmen shot him in the head and then allegedly fled to India. Hadi's death in hospital last week has triggered mass protests demanding justice. Angry mobs have torched the offices of prominent newspapers, the Daily Star and Protom Alo, accusing them of being aligned with India. Interim leader Mohammad Yunus has condemned the attack and said the elections, not violence, will honour Hadi's vision.
Osman Hadi was an enemy of the defeated forces of fascist terror. Any attempt to silence his voice to intimidate revolutionaries will be decisively resisted. The country's march toward democracy cannot be halted through fear, terror or bloodshed.
Police say the prime suspect in the murder is associated with the youth wing of Hasina's Awami League. Bangladesh is pressing India to extradite Hasina, who was sentenced to death last month for crimes against humanity, but India refuses to do so. That, and the allegations surrounding Hadi's killing, have exacerbated growing anti-Indian sentiment. One student leader has warned that if India refuses to send back Hasina and those responsible for Hadi's death, Bangladesh could host Indian separatists. For its part, India denies any role in the recent violence. Meanwhile, the alleged lynching of a Hindu worker in Bangladesh has sparked protests in India. Demonstrators marched towards Bangladesh's High Commission offices, prompting Dhaka to suspend visa services in New Delhi.
Dipudas was burned alive. I will not allow them to sit here in the Bangladeshi consulate. They will have to lock this up. I won't let them sit here. The Hindu community of the entire world will not let go.
Back in Bangladesh, violence continues. On Monday, a leader in the student-led National Citizen Party was shot and injured in the city of Khulna. Mohammad Yunus is struggling to hold the country together as fears grows that the security situation could worsen ahead of February's elections. Authorities have suspended the Awami League, but Hasina has warned that excluding her party could deepen political divisions. Many Bangladeshis are hoping that the vote will usher in a new era after years of authoritarian rule. But those hopes are already marred with old grievances and fresh anger.
So can Bangladesh stay stabilized enough to carry out that February 12th election? And what would be the consequences if not? Well, joining me now to debate that and more are from Dhaka, founder of Dhaka Forum, Afshak Zaman. Also in the Bangladeshi capital, human rights lawyer Takbir Huda. And from New York, adjunct professor at Pace University, New York, Shoaib Ahmad Bhuyan. Thank you all so much for being with me. Ashfaq, I'll start with you, and let's begin with the assassination of Sharif Osman Hadi. What did the perpetrators of that murder, and I'm putting it in quotations, achieve here? Have they intimidated his followers? Have they potentially disrupted the election? What are the consequences of their actions?
I think it's a very complex moment for the history of Bangladesh at this moment. Hadi's murder goes far beyond just electoral arithmetic. It has shaken something much deeper. It has sort of reignited the emotions of July within the hearts of our people. People who never met him, actually, they cried profusely at his funeral. Those, the marks, the sadness, all the emotions of July seems to be coming back. Now, what they have achieved is a very interesting question, because so far, the alleged, or at this point of the time, the findings indicate from the investigators towards former members or members of the Awami League. And it is interesting because Hadi is not the main arch rival of Awami League. Awami League's main arch rival is BNP and the chairman Tariq Rahman, probably second by Jamaat Islami Amir Dr. Shafiq, and then maybe the NCP leaders who were the front leaders of the July movement. But that's where it gets interesting, that why Hadi? Because he was, whoever did this knew the nuances of our social fragments very well. They knew that if Hadi is to be murdered, that will actually bring all the people in a lot of grievances, in a lot of anger. There will be certain different kinds of groups who will actually take to the streets, because Hadi did not essentially represent any political parties. He was an independent candidate. So the cracks of the society, the emotions have all been outburst. And whenever there is outburst of emotions, there is actually mobs, there is people agitated. It's in chaos, criminals and their greater master plans always thrives.
Interesting, though, but Ashfaq, could it, in a sense, backfire on the perpetrators themselves and what their aims may have been, including those nuances you're talking about, by turning more people against India and anyone perceived to be backed by India, as we've seen in some of the reactions?
Well, time will tell. At this point of the time, we are still going through a very critical phase. Of course, yes, our emotions have been stirred about national sovereignty, about unity, about the dignity of the common citizen's voice, which Hadi was fighting and raising voice for. But then again, also there are different fragmented groups. We have there are different opinions, different fragments. They all have their own agendas as well. And different political parties perhaps are also tackling this or viewing this in a different way. So whether we can hold on to the unity, whether we can hold on to the spirit of the Hadi's greater message, I think that is key, where it will decide whether the perpetrators have won or whether we as a country have won.
Okay. Takbir, let me ask you, would you describe what's happening now in Bangladesh as something that's been carefully calculated, or really just kind of chaos created by some rogue actors that are seeking revenge through violence?
I think there are elements of both. I mean, firstly, Hadi's assassination is so consequential because Hadi, as a leader, as an orator, as a campaigner, proved to be someone who was so incredibly rare that he didn't necessarily have any political party strength in the traditional sense, right? You have to understand Bangladesh has a history of dynastic politics where traditionally there's been a dynastic duopoly. And then you have someone like Hadi, who's not necessarily a product of class or party privilege, which is what traditionally dominates the political sphere. In fact, he comes from really humble origins, but he proves to be this incredible orator who finds resonance with millions of his followers because he speaks to a kind of class and religious dissonance which had been sidelined in mainstream political discourse. So in a sense, when whoever assassinated Hadi, and most are suspecting that it is members of the banned Awami League, although of course that's something we will only know once investigation is complete. really obviously wanted to nip such an independent political movement from arising, right? So the biggest threat to those who are comfortable with preserving the dynastic duopoly or party politics in Bangladesh is an independent voice like Hadi. And in terms of whether or not this is planned or pure chaos, I mean, you have to look at the string of attacks that are occurring in Bangladesh, and you have to I mean, and also just the assassination of Hadi itself. You know, these are individuals who first pretended, at least according to initial reports, that they were fellow, supporters of Hadi. They sort of infiltrated his safe space and then, hit him at his most vulnerable. So obviously, that level of success or assassination doesn't just happen randomly. It obviously requires some premeditation. And there's an open manhunt for where they are, as in where the killers are. And many, at least are suspecting that they've successfully fled across the border. And that, if that is in fact true, that also doesn't just happen randomly, right? Indians border, like India has a history of shooting Bangladeshis at the border if they are there without permission. If you look up the statistics on the border killings by the BSF or the Bharatiya security forces, you will see that that is a regular occurrence. So if you do in fact have killers or suspected killers who are then freely passing through, that also obviously is striking. But again, this is all sort of a formal investigation. This is all speculative at this stage. So I must, mention that caveat.
Right. Shoaib, your thoughts?
First of all, I think Hadi's killing was very much calculated. And as we can see, the killers of Hadi followed him for a couple of days, mingled with his campaign, worked as his campaign man. By this process, they actually knew every movement of Hadi and when he will be alone. And after this killing, the perpetrator were able to escape the scene and probably the country too. Now, Hadi was shot when he was a moving vehicle, and the killer shot from another moving vehicle, just one single bullet. That means the killer was highly trained as well. I also want to emphasize the purpose of killing of Hadi. The purpose, in my personal opinion, was to create anarchy in the country and create a situation where Dr. Mohammad Yunus-led government cannot organize the election in February, and the peaceful transition, democratic transition of power can hamper. Now, the question is, who doesn't want this democratic process to go and peaceful handover of the power? There are internal players who are Awami League and their fascist elements, and there are external powers. And popular belief is that external power is India.
Okay, interesting. So you do believe they want to create anarchy. But let me come back to Ashfaq then, because I have to ask how much power you think the interim government actually really has right now. Also, are they respected enough to make them strong enough to shore up the security that would be needed, organize the country, overcome this chaos, anarchy, whatever you want to call it, in order to hold this coveted election that's supposed to take place in less than 2 months' time?
To be honest, I think it's a case study on how the most supported government during its formation in terms of the interim government can become the most weakest in a span of 15 months. It's actually quite a surprise for many of us as well. At its inception, almost it was supported by all the major political parties. There was a consensus. But today, almost every major political party has raised grievances. Even parties once described as the close to the establishment, for example, the NCP, if I have to tell a name, have also gone on record with very strong criticism. It seems only a small number of ideologically right-wing probably remains somewhat supportive of the current government. But to be honest, we don't see this Hadi's murder sort of is sort of creating this weakness. We believe that it has exposed the weakness. The weakness was always there. And because it's not only about the murder itself, which is unforgivable, but the fact that the perpetrators still remain at large and investigations has not really been very conclusive at this point of the time. These are all different theories that we are presenting. Of course, there has been some evidences that they're telling that they have received. But the follow-up incidents, from the political violence to the attacks on media, it indicates the fragility of the law and order situation that we have now. I would also like to add over here that if you see what has happened over the last few weeks, even beyond this murder, we can see a pattern of destabilizing events. And it's happening one after the other, which government does not seem to be handling at the best of its capacity. It is also important to understand that Hadi was not an anarchist. So the followers of Hadi is not the one who is actually doing the anarchy. He wanted elections. He wanted stability with accountability. And very importantly, he himself participated in the electoral process. He was killed while he was actually propagating for his own election candidacy. So if someone is to claim about honoring Hadi's legacy, they must ensure that the election happens on time, not find excuses to postpone that.
Okay, it's interesting. Let me ask Takbir, because Ashfaq was insinuating that the capacity is there to if I understood correctly, perhaps find the perpetrators and shore up security in a way that means the election could be held. But there are others that doubt that because of the chaos that's been created. So in this lead up to February 12th, if the government can't shore up the security and the election doesn't happen, what happens?
Well, there are two parts to that question, right? So does the interim government in fact have the coercive capacity needed to ensure security at such a volatile time? And I'm actually inclined to believe that they do not. And these recent, security failures suggest that, they simply do not have the operational control needed to have prevented those. And by that, I don't just mean Hadi's assassination. I mean, you could have, an assassin who's carefully planned their attack and escape. But what you can't then also explain is what unfolded in the wake of Hadi's death, and that is the mob violence against two of the most, influential newspapers in Bangladesh, which is the Daily Star and the Prothomalo. And this is not unlike Hadi's assassination, which was a secret plan that then bore a public face. These attacks were planned very carefully and incited by two influencers who are of Bangladeshi origin but are based outside Bangladesh. And, they were openly directing their followers online using tech platforms. So it exposes two things. One, that if their hundreds of thousands of followers knew how to attack and whom to attack, surely that information was also available to the law enforcement officials who should have access to those tech platforms. But secondly, it's also, why did the government not act soon enough to limit the reach of these, inciters of violence? I mean, we know that these, under international human rights law, you can restrict content online, especially if it is inciting violence, right? We've seen that they've taken action retrospectively to at least get Meta to take down one of those influencers' accounts, but that could have been done much sooner. So I would like to believe that these were, security failures because the government lacks operational control over the law enforcement officials who, for whatever reason, chose not to act in those moments. Because the other possibility is far too frightening, that they could have acted and they didn't. I just can't, I don't find a rational reason as to why the IG would or the interim government would do that.
Okay, well, let me ask Shoaib then, if you believe the capacity is there to bring this under control and for the government to, at the very least, find the perpetrators of this crime. And if not, I mean, how much does the accountability matter? How much will it factor into Bangladesh's stability going forward, as well as, and I'm broadening it out greatly here, but as well as Indian-Bangladeshi relations?
Yeah, the killing has been happened already over 10 days, and the perpetrator is not captured yet. That indicates probably because, remember, Hasina's autocratic rule was all about surveillance, and they really developed some advanced surveillance capability to track anybody in the country. So if the killer is not captured yet, I have personally high doubt whether the killer is within the border. If the killer is outside of the border, which is, again, the popular belief is the killer is in India, then the government of Bangladesh probably cannot do anything here until India cooperate, and India has shown no signs of cooperation so far. If that is the case, then I don't think it's going to happen very soon. At the same time, again, as Ashfaq and Takbir both said, there is an influence of the security agencies, the detective branches and DGFIs and others in the mix of Hadi killing and aftermath, where they didn't respond accordingly to the vandalism of 2 newspapers and whatnot. So if there is a deep state and shadow government inside of the government who doesn't really want to find the killer of the Hadi and by default disrupt the election, which is my suspect as well, there are somebody inside and outside who doesn't want the democratic transition of the power in February, it will be very hard. Now, giving that in a thought, we can also consider how people came together after the killing of the Hadi. We saw the major political parties, BNP, Awami League, and newly formed NCP, and other political parties, all walks of life. People came across in the same platform, and Hadi's funeral was one of the largest in the country, and I don't know if it is one of the largest in the world, where 1 million and 2 million people probably were gathering there with a single voice that it is Bangladesh. Their popular slogan was Dhaka, not Delhi. That means whether Dhaka or Delhi, they chanted Dhaka, Dhaka. That means there is a sense of patriotism. There is a sense of unity. There is a sense, no matter what, we are here together, and we are here to fulfill Hadi's dream, as some panelists already said. Hadi's dream was to continue the democratic process, and he was one of the candidates.
Okay. Ashfaq, let me ask you this. I mean, it's clear, obviously, that there was and is tremendous support, not just for Hadi, but for the leaders of the student uprising in the first place. But now we have the banning of the Awami League, and there is still a contingent of society that supports the Awami League and Sheikh Hasina. So in order to go into a fair election that would satisfy the public, do concessions at this point need to be made to at least include a derivative of the Awami League?
I think, again, like as we're discussing about Hadi at different public meetings actually mentioned that there has to be a sort of reconciliation where the Awami League supporters who has not actively taken part in the anarchy, in the killings, there has to be some sort of reconciliation. We just can't ignore them. We just can't call them enemies. They are also part of this country. But at the same time, it becomes very complex when such killings actually happens by their members as well. So how do you know, like, who is an innocent person and who is not, who is still looking for doing conspiracies? Although, again, I have to say that these are, at this point of time, not conclusive. These are all indicative. But at least these are the initial indication shows some potential involvement from the Awami Leagues. So whatever has happened, I think these emotions that has been stirred up will travel with voters to the ballot box. And I think a proper voting will probably also give us the indication where and how the percentages of our population are actually thinking, because there are different parties, different wings who will be actually promoting different narratives. Some of the narratives might be, I will not say pro-Awami League, but will be more accommodating to Awami League. Okay. So it all depends on the voting results if we have a free and fair election.
Okay, yeah, Takbir, then do you foresee a way forward to give supporters of Awami League any voice in the upcoming election? And if not, what are the consequences, again, broadly, for India-Bangladeshi relationship that could further complicate domestic issues within Bangladesh?
Right. Look, there's a reason why transitional justice scholars are very, very they warn against collective punishment measures in the wake of, after revolution. But sadly, the interim government's the measures that it took to ban Awami League as a collective entity resembles what one may call is collective punishment. So here's where what Hadi, as an orator and a political commentator, envisioned as a way to deal with Awami League was very different from what the actual legislation which banned the Awami League did, which is basically criminalize anyone who is not only part of the Awami League, but who also says anything or does anything that the state could interpret as being favorable to Awami League. So that is a sweeping, length of criminalization. And, transitional justice scholars have warned that that is not, like, when that is what is done, what that might incentivize is actually chaos and disruption by the ostracized. So if you don't allow a party the option to reconstruct itself electorally, then they will seek other means of doing so, which is by creating disruption and chaos. Now, I understand, as our fellow commentator was saying, it's hard to say which of the Awami League genuinely wants to reconstruct itself and which of it is only pretending until they have a chance to strike, as they did with Hadi. So it is a difficult problem, but because of the collective punishment and collective criminalization, you can see why the Awami League is then incentivized to create chaos and disruption. And that is why people are then attributing these acts of violence to it. And obviously, India's role is very central because India is the one who's granting them safe haven instead of cooperating with Bangladesh.
Takbir, that will have to be the final word. And Shoaib, I apologize for not getting a final comment in from you, but we are completely out of time for this edition of the Newsmakers. I'd like to thank all three of you so much, sincerely, for being with me. Our viewers for joining us as well. Remember, you can follow us on social media, and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.